our dear, dear Reverend Kathy, who is going to speak the message today. Where do we go from here?
Yes, thank you so much, Carolyn.
Thank you, Kathy.
Well, good morning, everyone. Um, I am speaking this morning on where do we go from here? And I chose this title because I've been reviewing Martin Luther King's sermons, Martin Luther King Jr.'s sermons. And he has a sermon of that title, Where Do We Go From Here? And I was so inspired by this particular sermon. He was such an amazing man, such an orator, such a man of deep faith, and such a powerful leader. And I just, in the time that we're in right now in our country, I feel like his vision and his values, his leadership, his faith, his dedication to nonviolence and change through nonviolence in the civil rights movement of the 60s is so relevant now. It's so helpful now. For me, when our society is going through something demanding, something challenging, a moment in time that is challenging, it's so wise to look at past moments in history that were similar to gain understanding and see how we've dealt with it, how we've dealt with the challenge most effectively in the past. And so, in our country right now, we've had, I think we're on the 12th or 13th day of protests, these nationwide huge protests with thousands and thousands of mostly peaceful protesters. And, the inspiration that began all this protesting was the killing of another black man by a white police officer. And so there's this protesting of police brutality, but also of racism and of systemic racism, racism that's just been going on for hundreds of years. And I feel like we are in a big moment where there can be so much transformation and realization and awakening. And it's a big movement right now. It's gained tremendous energy. And, granted, there have been a small minority of people causing violence, but the vast majority of people are peacefully protesting, and they're demanding changes. And I think as they're marching and demanding changes, they're getting clearer on what those changes need to be. And the great thing about this moment is that we're finally having a conversation. A lot of people are talking about this need for change, and it's broad. It's a broad need for change. I feel like it's rippling out, and I was inspired to see pictures some of you posted of the march that you had in Oroville last week. We had a march here in Mount Shasta last week, and it's just far and wide, and it's every race, and it's so many people joining together in peace, peacefully, nonviolently, saying change needs to come. And I think that we are finally getting closer to really talking about the problem of racism. And I know, it makes people uncomfortable, but I think that's because we're taking something out from under the rock, kind of out from the closet, and we're shining a light on it. We're shining a light on it. And we need to do that. We need to see the problem in broad daylight to begin to examine how we can change it, how we can heal it, how we can transform and become a more perfect union. Unity headquarters sent out their statement on social justice this past week, and I reread it. I had read it a long time ago, but it's powerful. And I sent it out in the newsletter this week, but I'd like to read a piece of it now. This is Unity Worldwide. This is their stance on social justice. Quote, "The Unity movement stands for and will tirelessly work for harmony, so all people may know the freedom of peaceful expression, so they may know their own inner worth an essential contribution to the whole of life. Where there are divisions of opinions, beliefs, and perspectives, unity embraces curiosity, exploration, and expanded awareness of the gifts of diversity. Expanded awareness of the gifts of diversity. Love that. I love the unity movement. I've been, part of it since the early 90s. Because to me, it is the most open-minded and inclusive of spiritual paths. It guides us into not being intimidated by other beliefs, but to be curious, to explore, and seek to understand others with an inclusive mind, with an inclusive heart. Years ago, I got a letter from a woman named Elaine, who was to become a dear friend of mine. And in the letter that she wrote me, she shared she'd just lost her mom. And she'd found my CD Mother Song, and she'd been listening over and over. And just, it had been really helping her in her process of grief. And so in her letter, she asked if I was going to be performing in the Bay Area where she lived anytime soon. And it so happened I was going to be there in a couple weeks. So she came to see me, and I remember the day I walked into that church in the Bay Area, and there was Elaine, this beautiful, petite African-American woman, sitting in the front row. And I immediately felt this heart connection with her. And we went on to become really close friends. And I would visit her. She lived in Berkeley. I'd stay with her in Berkeley. She'd come visit me in Mount Shasta. We met up in Hawaii. She came to some of my retreats there. But Elaine really opened my eyes. She taught me a lot through sharing her journey of dealing with racism, with lifelong racism. And I got a window into an experience of life I've never had. And she helped me understand what it meant to be black and deal with things that I have never dealt with. And that understanding has been really important to me. In a way, it opened my heart to all black people much more. I think a big part of racism is fear, and fearing the other who is different. Fearing what we don't understand, fearing other customs, other ways of living, other ways of being that are different from ours. We tend to fear what we don't understand. And so to me, as I've been really contemplating this week, where do we go from here? What's the answer? I think the answer is understanding. And I think that's the beginning of healing, and that's the beginning of love, and that's the beginning of change. And I think that because this conversation is dominating the airwaves right now, it feels like there is a chance, a huge chance now for greater understanding, a lot greater understanding, a lot of sharing, and a lot of listening, and hopefully a lot of change, not just talk, but real change. So Dr. Martin Luther King, if you take the time to read his sermons, I've been posting parts of his sermon a lot lately and online and on Facebook. But he was a man of such faith and such love. He was an amazing man. He skipped a couple of years in high school, went straight to college. He was just very, very intelligent, and he had incredible vision. And he, not only that, but he just had this indwelling presence of God that he was so attuned to, that he just felt guided by, It was his dharma to live the powerful life he lived. And he didn't lose himself in hatred. And I think that was why he was such a great leader. He could hold on to love in the face of a lot of hatred. He could have a peaceful heart, but still passionately protest injustice. And one of the things that he demonstrated, as did one of his greatest influences, Mahatma Gandhi, another great nonviolent leader, one of the greatest things that Dr. King demonstrated is that we can't fight hatred with hatred. He said, you cannot murder. We can't meet violence with violence. And he really was inspired by Gandhi. And when you look at Gandhi's nonviolent efforts, they were successful. He liberated India from England. And when violence would erupt in the demonstrations, Gandhi would put the movement in deep freeze, and he'd turn the focus to self-examination. He'd take everybody deeper, and he would help his people see strength isn't so much about physical capacity. It's about will. It's about an indomitable will. It's about what Dr. King called an unassailable and majestic sense of values. And so, as Dr. King studied Gandhi's success, he felt persuaded by the power of love to overcome injustice. And Dr. King told his supporters, love must be at the forefront of our movement if it is to be a successful movement. And when we speak of love, we speak of understanding, goodwill toward all men. So in Dr. King's sermon that so inspired me this week, he says, where do we go from here? And that is the question that I ask. Where do we go from here? What do we do? What's the way forward now? Where do we go from here? In his answer to that question, he says, we must massively assert our dignity and worth. We must stand up amid a system that still oppresses us and develop an unassailable and majestic sense of values. I love that. I've never heard it put that way. Develop a majestic sense of values. Majestic. It's so deep and so broad what he's saying here, and it applies not only to people of color. It applies to any one of us who ever feels less than, who feels that we're somehow less worthy at times, or less valued, or less valuable, or less lovable, or less important, or less beautiful, or just less in any way than others. We sometimes believe we are less than because of our conditioning, and it's our hurdle to overcome, Our hurdle for all of us is to get to greater self-love. Then our love can flow out like a waterfall to get to greater self-worth. Even as a minister, I just feel like I wish I could do a better job. I sometimes doubt myself. I sometimes just feel like I wish I could have expressed my heart more fully. So I think we all at times deal with this lack of sense of self worth. And so Dr. King really had beautiful teachings on this. I was reading a post from Maravia's Facebook post last week, and I asked her ahead of time if I could share this. But there was something that she wrote that was very poignant. She wrote about her own personal journey of growing up experiencing racism and the pain of that. And she shared something her mother taught her. Her mother said, "You must love yourself more than others hate you because of the color of your skin." That just really touched me. You must love yourself more than others hate you for whatever reason they have. You must love yourself more than others hate you. What a deep teaching your mother gave you, Ravia. It's a teaching for us all. Can we love ourselves more than others judge us or criticize us or hate us or misunderstand us? Dr. King was also hugely inspired by his parents, by his upbringing. He says one of the lessons his parents taught him is the lesson he calls somebodyness. Somebodyness. He describes somebodyness as a state of self-dignity and worthiness, despite what others may think. a deep inner resolve that nobody can convince me that I am not somebody. Dr. King urged his followers to no longer be ashamed, to no longer feel less than. And I think this is a teaching for us all in believing in ourselves and in our divine inheritance and in our divine goodness and in our highest values, our majestic values, and in our highest potential to effect change, to bring greater good and greater equality and greater justice, greater fairness to our world. So let me share one more of Unity's statements on social justice. Quote, where there is oppression and hatred, we stand for justice and understanding, and for extending compassion, kindness, and forgiveness to restore balance. To restore balance. Where there is discrimination, we stand for inclusivity and equality. We pledge to be an advocate for the well-being, respect, and civil freedom of every human being. It makes me proud to be part of this unity movement. Something else Dr. King said that really resonated with me is, he said, justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. I love that. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. If we can be that love that corrects everything that stands against love, we'd surely make a difference in this world. I think one of the things that this moment in time is asking us is to not just be silent. I saw you've been seeing a lot of these signs, silence is violence. And I think there's really something to contemplate there, you know, and to not just let others march, but to speak out and take action. And I know a lot of you have been marching. We can be the love in action that corrects what stands against love. So, in closing, I leave you with some final words from Dr. King. Let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Let us go out realizing that the Bible is right. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Whatever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. This is our hope for the future. And with this faith, we will be able to sing in not some too distant tomorrow with a cosmic past tense. We have overcome. We have overcome. Deep in my heart, I did believe we would overcome. May we overcome racism. May we overcome inequality and division and unite as one people, one beautiful, diverse humanity, people of God, celebrating diversity and bringing a new era of greater well-being and greater peace and greater love to this world and to all its people. So be it. So be it. And so it is. Thank you all.
Amen.
Amen.
Oh, Kathy, thank you for such a beautiful message. Oh, Martin
You're
Luther
welcome.
King. He's our saint. He's a saint.
Yes.